And this story is a ripper. How does a government accidentally give away 50,000 more passports than they were supposedly doing? I'm talking about immigration. I mentioned earlier on today that the state's population of Queensland has hit 5.5 million. New figures have been revealed by the ABS. Queensland's population grew by 2.3%. The Australian Bureau of Statistics released the data. 30,000 interstate visitors moved to Queensland. But what intrigues me is we're still way over our supposed immigration rate targets. And I'm fascinated to know that the effect that this has on housing and house prices. This story is getting bigger, not smaller. Leith Van Onselen is a former Commonwealth Treasury official. These days, he's economist at macrobusiness.com. I spoke to him earlier this morning and asked him to explain what is going on.
Yeah, so Steve, in the year to June, so that's the latest data we've got, so last financial year, we got 446,000 net overseas migrants. Now, that was 51,000 higher than was forecast in the May federal budget for the same period.
How do you accidentally give out 51,000 more passports?
Look, this has been a constant problem since this government came in. When they first came to office in 2022, they had their first federal budget in October 2022, and they said that we get 470,000 net overseas migrants in the first 2 years under Labor. Instead, we got closer to about 1 million. Once, based on this data, it's closer to around 1 million. And every single budget they've done, or mid-year economic fiscal update since they've gotten elected, they've actually understated the amount of migration that we're going to get. And the way it happens is that the federal government only sets the permanent migrant program. They don't set the temporary migrant program. And basically there's two streams of migrants. So you get the permanents who come over here and they're supposed to stay, forever. And then you have temporary migrants like students and working holiday makers, temporary skilled visas, things like that, where they come over on a temporary basis. Those numbers are uncapped and they may or may not leave, and they tend to stay for a very long time. So they're not quite permanent, but they're long-term temporary generally. And that's the number that's blown out.
Queensland has now hit the 5 million population mark. 30,000 came in the last 12-month period. What is the effect on things like housing prices and infrastructure for that sort of growth?
Oh, look, obviously, when people come in to your state or to Australia more generally, they need somewhere to live. So the biggest impact, or the most visible impact, is in the housing market. And this massive flow of people that we've gotten in the last, several years, it's put immense strain on the housing market. And that's why we've seen rental vacancy rates collapse and we've seen rents surge. And obviously people becoming homeless, living in their cars, etc., because, demand from population growth has far exceeded supply. And that has put immense pressure on the housing market, unfortunately.
Now, I was at an event I was in a room full of economists in Brisbane last night, and three very experienced economists, I won't name them, but all said Australia's housing problem is all about supply. But you don't agree, Leith Van Onselen.
No, I don't know who they are, but they sound like a pack of liars, to be quite frank, Steve. I mean, it's not rocket science. Anybody that you bring in from overseas, if you import a renter, that renter needs to rent somewhere. And they need housing. It's not magic. They need housing. They need all these other sorts of things that we have to provide. And
now why aren't they living in private student accommodation, things like that? In other words, there's not far from where I am in the heart of Brisbane, there are tower blocks of student accommodation which they can rent out, designed specially for them. Why isn't that soaking up the demand?
Oh, look, it's certainly soaking up some of them, but the problem is the demand through students and population growth and immigration more generally has far exceeded that. Some research came out earlier this year which said that about 80% of foreign students live in the private rental market. So we don't have nearly enough of that stuff. We don't have enough rental housing more generally. And as a result, we've got people, becoming homeless or moving into group housing, or things like that. We just don't have enough housing, and it's a two-pronged factor. Obviously, we've had this unbelievable migration the last several years, where about 1 million people have come in 2 years net. But we've also had the maturity of Peter Costello's baby bonus kids. So, listeners might remember about 20 years ago, or just over nearly 25 years ago, the Howard government brought in the baby bonus, and it paid, gave people money to have children. We had a little mini spike in the birth rate, and voila, 20 odd years later, those people are now entering the housing market.
They now want somewhere to live.
That's it. So look, that's the reason why the civilian labour force, so that's basically the population in Australia above 15, has grown faster than the actual population increase, because we've had people have gone from children to become young adults. And look, almost all of Australia's population growth has come from net overseas migration. Like that is by far the key driver. But this has also been a second round impact. But the maturity of Peter Costello's baby bonus kids, they all need housing. So migrants, we just don't have enough of it. Simple as that.
My guest is Leith Van Onselen. He's chief economist at macrobusiness.com.au. This is 612 ABC Brisbane. Whenever I speak with a federal politician in the government about this, they say we need skills. So what we're doing is we're importing the skills that we need. In fact, other economists have told me that. Economists like Stephen Hamilton, who I speak to on a fairly regular basis. He says what our migration program is supposed to be doing is bringing in skills so we can build the houses, so we have people from construction. Are they the skills that are actually coming into the country, or is it yoga teachers and things like that?
Yeah, they're not. They're absolutely not. Hardly any migrants that come in work in construction. It is that the percentage is tiny. So what it basically tells you is that our migration system is adding far more to housing demand than supply, because very few of the migrants actually work in housing. Like literally there's about 1,500 or something of the migrants that we've gotten the last year or so have gone into construction. That's, out of over nearly 500,000. So that's a ridiculous notion. The other one on skills more generally, I'd argue that Australia's migration system is actually worsening Australia's skills crisis, because
Why?
we're not getting the right type of migrants, and this is actually borne out in the data at a macro level. Australia's population has grown by 8.5 million people this century, and we've been running this huge migration system for about 20 years. So almost all of Australia's population growth has come from net overseas migration, and we've grown the population by 8.5 million people this century, yet we've got worse skills shortages than ever. And the reason for that, Steve, is that we import someone to do something, they end up not doing that, they end up working in other areas like, driving Ubers or whatever, and then we just add to demand for those skills that we actually need in the first place. And then we end up, having... And the other problem with it is, Steve, it's a bit of a whack-a-mole situation. So, for example, I'll just give an example. If we imported 5 million construction workers to build houses, right, which never happened, but I'm just come down this road with me. We could solve the so-called shortage of construction workers by doing that, but those 5 million people would need houses themselves, obviously. Their families would need houses. A lot of them would come over with their partners and kids and that sort of stuff. So that adds to demand. But not just that, we then have shortages in a whole bunch of other areas, because those 5 million construction workers would need healthcare. They'd need education, teachers for their children. They need, road space. They need all this other stuff, all the other services and whatever that economy needs. We then have shortages in those areas. So then the solution would be, you know what? We need more teachers. We need more nurses. We need more doctors. We need more whatever. So then we'll import those people, and then we'll end up back to square one with a shortage of construction workers, because all the people that we've had to import to cover the demands from the people that we've imported in the first place will need other things. And this is why the whole system does not work, because for 20 odd years we've run this system. We've grown the population by 8.5 million people this century, and yet Australia's skills shortages are worse than they've ever been, which tells you that it's not working. So don't keep making the same mistakes.
Leith Van Onselen, chief economist at macrobusiness.com.au, is my guest. Well, I want to end the discussion and sticking with housing theme, but I want to play you something that Australia's Federal Housing Minister, Claire O'Neill, said this week. So let me drop this on you and tell me what's going on here, because I don't understand this. So she was on Triple J's Hack program, and the presenter asked her a question: do you want house prices to fall in Australia? We know they're stratospherically high at the moment. Leith, I'm a millionaire. Someone offered me $1 million for my house, and I couldn't believe it. It's not even worth a third of that. But anyhow, there's absurd prices for houses in Australia at the moment. But let me play you and I just want to get your take on what Claire O'Neill said.
What is the goal here in terms of these policies? Is it to bring down house prices? Is that what the government wants to do?
We want to bring house price growth into something sustainable. So we're not trying to bring down house prices, but we don't want to see some of the growth that we've seen in some parts of the country where you're getting double-digit increases in house prices year on year.
Why don't you want to be seeing house prices drop? Because if you're looking to get into the market, if you're a young person looking at what's ahead of you, you definitely want to see house prices come down.
Well, that may be the view of young people. It's not the view of our government. We want to see sustainable price growth. We want to see more houses come online. We want to see that rental vacancy rate go up a bit because that will relieve pressure on renters, and we certainly want to see more homeowners, and the government has taken action on all of those pieces this
Minister,
week.
if house prices don't come down, doesn't that mean that this system is stacked against young people, that it's just not going to work for them?
Sure, and Dave, we may have a difference of view about this. I have a strong view. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to grow sustainably.
That's Federal Housing Minister Claire O'Neil on Triple J. The federal government deliberately wants sustainable price growth in an overheated market where the average price of a house is unaffordable. I don't understand this, Leith Van Onselen.
Yeah, look, so what that does, Steve, it basically highlights the charade around the housing affordability in this country. The fact of the matter is, if our politicians genuinely want more affordable housing, prices have got to fall. It's as simple as that. You can't have prices continuing to rise and then say that you're solving the housing affordability crisis. So intrinsic to what she's saying is we basically want wages to catch up. But they'll never catch up because wages barely grow above inflation anyway. And, so I don't know what this so-called sustainable price growth is. It doesn't exist. And look, basically, Steve, she's playing basic electoral math, right? So 2/3 of Australians, roughly, are either own their home or they're paying off a mortgage. Right, so that's 2/3 of voters who don't want to see the value of their asset fall.
Yep.
I mean, I'm generalising because I own my house and I personally don't care if it falls in value.
Yep.
Because I've got kids.
Yep.
I want them to be able to get in, but most people don't think that way. And so she's basically playing the numbers game. If only 1/3 of Australians roughly are renters and 2/3 of them own a home or are paying off a mortgage, she's playing towards the people, the 2/3 rather than the 1/3. And unfortunately, that is why housing policy in this country is stuffed. And, if she genuinely wanted to solve the housing affordability crisis, the best thing the federal government can do is severely cut net overseas migration. That is good for first home buyers for two reasons, Steve. Firstly, it'd bring down rents. So it'd mean that first home buyers can save a deposit quicker. And secondly, it'd bring down prices directly. So it'd make it a lot easier for first home buyers because their rents wouldn't be as high. Which would make it easier to save a deposit, and then the actual price of housing would be lower as well, which means they could buy a house. So that is the number one solution, but unfortunately the federal government never wants to go down that road, and they want to instead talk in circles and pretend to be doing everything, claim it's a supply issue when it's really excessive demand issue, et cetera, et cetera.
I'll leave it there. Leith Van Onselen, thank you very much for your time once again.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Leith Van Onselen, economist, former Commonwealth Treasury economist these days at macrobusiness.com.au.